I am Militant Ginger and I'm back once again with another book review. Today I'm going to be delving deep into the Bond community once again and reading a book by one of our own, Jeremy Dunn's Enemy Action. So the reason I chose this book, which I bought for full price on Kindle from Amazon, was because Jeremy Duns and another writer, AJ Chowdhury, got together and spent an hour going over the literary Bond during Operation Freefall, which was a sort of Bond community event, and it was a really fascinating hour. It was really great, and also created this thing called the hashtag Fleming Reading Challenge, which is where everyone was challenged to read the Ian Fleming books again in order. Anyway, before that event took off, I wanted to actually read some of the stuff by AJ and Jeremy. I unfortunately only had enough time to read about half of Jeremy's book, but it was terrific. So this book, Enemy Action, is a kind of delve into the life of Ian Fleming, or moreover the sort of literary life of Ian Fleming, his reputation. Ian Fleming, as you know, wrote the James Bond books, and when he started off after the publication of Casino Royale in 1953, people loved it. They thought it was a great book, and it was pretty celebrated. It got some very good reviews and things. It was interesting because Ian Fleming, of course, his brother Peter Fleming, was a very successful and very well respected author among literary circles. And Ian Fleming, I believe at that time, was the foreign manager of the Kelmsley newspaper group, which owned the Sunday Times. So he was very well connected within literary circles. And also he was about to get married to Anne Charteris, who was another very well connected woman. So he had lots of literary connections, and when he wrote a book, I think he kind of leveraged those to be respected among literary circles, and then slowly there was this sort of concerted attack against his reputation and his idea of being literature that's gone on to this day. I mean, these days, if you talk to anyone about, oh, what do you think of Ian Fleming, most people will say, oh, he's a misogynist and a racist and stuff, having never read any of his books or anything like that. It was really interesting because Jeremy Dunn's book is basically delving into that particular evolution of thought regarding Ian Fleming's book. So he starts off identifying the people who kind of first targeted Ian Fleming and started attacking him in their various newspaper columns and things like that. And then he kind of follows it through about how that has actually evolved into where people think of James Bond now. And like a lot of writers, people these days have very specific opinions about figures like Ian Fleming, never having read any of his books, sometimes not even having watched the movies based off his books. And it's just interesting how polarized people can become about writers when they haven't read their books. I mean, and that's what I really liked, I think, about Jeremy Dunn's book. It was he specifically calls people out on it, but there is this thing: you can't have a critique of a book unless you've read it, and you can't have a critique of a writer unless you've read a broad spectrum of his books. And that's not what happened in the case of Ian Fleming, and I think that's not what happened in the case of a lot of other writers. When I was young, when I was young, over 20 years ago, in fact, it is actually the 21st anniversary of my first day at university, where I did history and Victorian studies, which was an English literature thing. We did a lot of sort of English literature and delving into and dissecting books and things. And I think it's really interesting because at that point, one of the books I read was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand is a contemporary of Ian Fleming, and actually I think in some ways they share many of the same good points and bad points. Ayn Rand was an eminently quotable writer, and she had such fascinating ideas. I don't think they were necessarily that well executed, but back when I was studying English literature, she was a darling. Everyone was like, oh, she's a feminist, strong female character, stuff like that, which is all true. And these days, you mention Ayn Rand and everyone's going to be like, you're some alt-right asshole. I just find it so interesting how in the space of 20 years of me being interested in books, that kind of like evolution has taken place. And yeah, Jeremy Duns explains that process with Ian Fleming's literary career. So it's a really well written book because it's very quick, very fast flowing, and Jeremy Duns writes in a very concise manner. And he does kind of guide the narrative, obviously, because the purpose of the book is to basically explain that the literary reputation of Ian Fleming was kind of destroyed unfairly. But even though he does that, it's very unobtrusive, the way he kind of like guides the narrative. I have like ADHD or whatever, so sometimes it is difficult for me to get fully immersed in a book, but I will admit I started reading Jeremy's book and I read it in no time at all. It was blink of an eye. And yeah, not many authors can really grab me and hook me like that, especially with everything going on in my life. So yeah, it was a terrific book. And I'm very pleased that I've discovered Jeremy Duns as a writer, and I'm going to go off and I want to read some of his fiction books next. And it all happened thanks to this Bond community that we've got. And it's been really fun to read all the different books that people have written there. So I'm going to continue that. I think I'll probably move on to AJ Chowdhury's book next. And if you're interested in that and all the other book reviews that I'm going to be doing, stay tuned. Oh God, what is it? All the YouTubers on my kids' channels they go like, punch that subscribe button in the face and then grab that bell icon and like twist it until it notifies you or whatever. So there we go. Hip kids me. See you next time.